Welcome to the CIDCI Online Salon Series. I'm Margie O'Driscoll, and on behalf of the CIDCI Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you here today. The Center for Innovation in the Design and Construction Industry is a not-for-profit organization that relies on your financial support to provide these programs. Thank you to our sponsors who make all of this possible. Please consider participating in CIDCI as a listener to these free webinars or as a sponsor. If your company needs to stay abreast of the latest innovation, and if you want to inspire your colleagues, we are your go-to destination. CIDCI is also pleased to announce the Research to Practice initiative, which invites students from around the world to submit a solution to a wicked problem in the AEC industry. Submission requirements can be found on the CIDCI website. We will be awarding at least $5,000 in prize money to individuals or teams. As we begin our time together today, we would also like to extend our solidarity with our Ukrainian partners and the people of the Ukraine. The Russian invasion is not only a war on Ukraine, but a threat to democracy, human rights, and world peace. International collaboration is at the heart of CIDCI, and we are proud of our international partners across the globe. We stand with the people of the Ukraine. Okay, here's a bit of information about how today's session will work. We're recording this presentation and we'll place it on the CIDCI website and YouTube as soon as possible. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, please use the chat box. Today's session will run for 60 minutes. Today, we are so lucky to have Henry Nutt joining us for the launch of his new book. Henry is a former sheet metal general superintendent and local 104 member, and he is now a pre-construction executive at Southland Industries. He's a passionate leader and a board member at both LCI and AGC of America. His new book is 7 Principles, Creating Success in the Construction Industry. This volume posits actionable and achievable pathways to integrate marginalized communities into the AEC industry. His book also outlines practical steps that address mindsets that hinder progress, and he also presents a grassroots approach to leadership in DEI. Welcome, Henry.
Thank you, Margie. I appreciate the introduction and very honored to be here today. Thank you for the CIDCI having me here. So I'm very excited about being with you all. So let's go right into it. I've spent a lot of time pondering about this topic. I get a chance to do that a lot, and you'll hear about why. But today's topic, we construct innovative structures with people, and we can never get away from the people. The people part is the blood of our industry. No matter what we're building, we'll always do it with people. We have robots and technology, but they'll never take away the element of what people do together. And we can all agree, I'm assuming, that we indeed have a problem. We have a labor shortage issue. We have people killing themselves in our industry at a very high rate. And so there's some things that we have to do differently. And so I am very excited about the opportunity to be with you, to share my snippet of what I believe we can do. And I think we all have something that we can add to this issue that plagues our industry that we love. Whether you're working with tools, directing folks with the tools, or you're designing projects, you're part of the pre-con group. Either way, we all have a part to play, and it's important that we dig in and do that. And my subtitle of DEI is the way we get the people that we need. And I would also add it's the way that we keep the people that we have once they arrive. And so we've done a lot in construction that hasn't been good. That hasn't been promoting good welfare and the whole idea of what it looks like to work together. So we have a lot of work to do. So again, very excited to be here with you today. All right, so my objectives for today. What am I trying to get done here? I really want to raise awareness. I want people to walk away feeling like they learned a little bit of something today. If I could, I don't want to hit anybody, but if I could metaphorically give a gut punch and get people to be stirred up, and if it's a wake-up call, whatever that looks like, or aha moment, if there is something that you can take away out of this presentation, where you find yourself in it, not just the words I'm saying or the pictures or the words that you read, but where do you find yourself in this whole storyline and what you can do as a leader, as an influencer, maybe as a bystander, but someone that can get involved and find yourself where you fit into this whole scheme of moving our industry forward in a positive way. It's a call to action for sure. And there's some times when we can walk away and say, hey, well, if you're ignorant of something, you're not necessarily liable or accountable to it. Well, hopefully you learned something new today that will help you to be more accountable and recognize that you do have a role to play. And it's not for someone else, it's for you. And you can do your part. I hope to provide some resources. I'm not going to be able to go through all of them, but maybe introduce you to some things that I think you could find helpful, that you can go do your own research. Maybe you know some of these things. Perhaps it'll be the first time you hear them. Regardless, we want to continue to learn. We need to educate ourselves so we can understand the dynamics of this situation that we're in when it comes to work retention, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. What does that look like? What does it mean when it comes to our responsibility that we have and how we can be effective in that role? And ultimately, I'm all about hearts and minds. That's the person that I am. That's the human being that I am. I believe that you can't get anything done unless you affect the heart. And then it's what we think, but it's why we think what we think. And so I hope that, again, maybe some of you will have an aha moment today where you can walk away saying, I got something that really is going to help me. So just to kind of go into a little bit more about my roles, because I think it's important to say, well, why am I here? What qualifies me to be at this platform and talk to you? Short span of about 3 years in a pre-con role and with Southland, and then 12 years, a little bit more as a superintendent. So I got a chance to really manage labor and go around projects and really kind of had to manage people. And that was very different for me when I first got into that role. And I learned a whole lot. And as Margie mentioned, I've been in the industry overall for 34 years. So I've got to see a lot. I've got to see our industry evolve, grow, change, go in a good direction, in a not so good direction. Met some fabulous people that I still call friends today, continue to meet more. And yes, the author of a book. Has been a 10-year mission to write 87 pages. There's a story behind that, but I did it. So I'm grateful. And hope that it helps people. And I sit on the national board for the Associated General Contractors of America. It's my first year in this role, and so I have a chance to be at a national level with member companies that make up about 28,000 members, and hoping to help shape policy and what that this association does to impact the construction industry, which has basically a real significant influence on that. I also am the chair for the AGC of America's Diversity and Inclusion Steering Committee nationally. And so that's been about 3 years. We're going into my third year. I've been a part of it since its inception about 6 years ago. So I've learned a lot from just being in that role. I didn't aspire to be a chair of this committee, but I found myself being put in these positions, and I said, okay, I'm going to try it. But what it's done for me is helped me connect with a bunch of people who are way smarter than me, and just connecting with them and learning from them and being exposed to things I probably would just be real ignorant to this day. So it's really helped me to expand how I think about all this that I'm talking about with you today. And I also sit on the AGC's California DE&I steering committee that's chaired by Dr. Giovanna Brasfield. So that gives me another perspective, kind of closer to home, and being able to influence what we're doing in California. And then I'm the vice chair currently of Lean Construction Institute's board of directors. And again, that gives me this opportunity to kind of connect on with the construction world even more and what we're doing to influence, because there's definitely a marriage when we think about the tenets of lean construction, which one of them, and the biggest one, is respect for people. And so this all kind of ties together. So it's not just to show you my accolades because I'm great and wonderful. It's really to kind of demonstrate that there's this kind of encompassing forms of thoughts and ideas and experiences that help shape what I'm going to talk to you about this morning. So more importantly than anything else, I'm a dad. And this is my family here, and so to the far left is Caden. He's a 21-year-old, about to be a junior in college, transferring over to a university that he still hasn't decided fully yet where he's going. He's an avid soccer player, pretty awesome young man. And then next to him is Alina. She's my 17-year-old, just went to her prom, will be a senior next year. And she tries to run the family, probably does most of the time. She's the most tenacious out of all of us, but a sweetheart. And then there's my oldest, 24-year-old Nyla, who's a pre-med student, just graduated in 2020 and should be going to medical school next year. And she actually calls me Father Henry. That's a story too. So when we think about what I'm talking about today, a part of it has to do with them, right? I mean, we think about our families, our children. That ties everything together for us. It makes the mission of what we're doing more important. And I have to think about them when they may not be in construction, but they're a part of this country, and what they do and what I do impacts who they are. And so that's a little bit about me. So I wrote a book. I'm not going to go into that book, but those are the principles of the book. Those are the things that I have learned over my course of time and from my own dad, and also being able to sit in front of different pre-apprenticeship programs around the United States and California primarily, and find myself saying the same thing to different people about how you get in and how you stay in, how you get in your own way. And then also tying into the labor shortage, some statistics that are in there about things that I've read years ago that now are really in fruition right now. So very excited about that. And it's, again, my snippet of a contribution to what I believe that I can do, again, to help people have success, experience success in our industry. So what's the current state? I pondered on this back and forth for a while. Right now, as I said, I am in Southern California. I've been in meetings with my company here in our office, and I live in Northern California. And so I was on a plane. So as I'm riding on this plane, I'm thinking about this presentation and really wanting to be impactful, and thinking about how do I introduce this idea and this concept of where I believe we are as an industry. And what I thought about was I looked out the window of my plane and I said, oh, that's it. It's like my own aha moment, an epiphany. This will be a great way to introduce this topic. And it really is for me. And so it's obviously in a plane above the clouds with blue sky. So what's that got to do with the current state? Some of us, if the shoe fits on you, then it fits. If it's not you, then I'm not talking to you. However, there are many of us who live in a world where that's where we're at. We're above the clouds. It's blue sky, sunshine, no rainy days. You know, we have our issues in life, but for the most part, all is good. You know, we sit in our offices. We know what's going on to some degree out there, we think, but for the most part, we live above the clouds. We're not really in touch with what's going on in reality. And that's part of the perspective in the current state that exists today. There are some people who just don't get it. There's some people, and they're not bad people for not getting it. They just don't get it. But some of those people who don't get it are the ones who are in control. They're the ones who have the power and the authority to make change happen. And they're out of touch. Think about the people that say you are that person that has the authority to make those decisions. You have a corner office, you are in the C-suite or some type of executive position. Even where you go home to at night is different than what many of your coworkers or the people that work for you go home. And we have no idea what that looks like. We have no idea what issues they face, their families are facing, but they show up every day with a smile most of the time to perform their jobs because they love what they do. But we may be completely out of touch with what they're experiencing and how they show up and how what we do influences how they show up. And so does it mean that we have to go and change the world and fix everybody and it's our responsibility to do that? No, but it is important that we're in touch. I had a conversation with an executive from a general contractor several years ago, and he talked to our group, and we asked him what was the most important thing for him as a behavior or an aspect that he could say was more powerful than anything else. And he stood there and paused for a minute, and he said, the one thing that I want to see that's most important and impactful is for people to have empathy. I didn't see that coming from him. I did not see that coming from him, but it really ties it together that if we have no way of connecting with what people are experiencing and actually care about what they're experiencing, then we will live that life continuously in the clouds, not seeing that there is another world out there. And so, what is that other world? And it's all going to tie together, I promise. As I mentioned, that suicide is prominent in our industry, and we have folks that show up to work. Just sit with me for a minute on that. Show up to work to come to kill themselves. They do. It's not an accident. They actually show up to kill themselves at work, and we are leading that statistically, sadly. And if we're not leading it, we're very close in the second or third percentile. And so it's important for us to understand. And I want to read this bottom line here on the screen. It says, with a suicide rate that is 4 times greater than the national average, the construction industry is facing a crisis. Construction workers are at a heightened risk for suicide for a variety of reasons that we'll talk about that can all be addressed, starting with changing the culture in the workplace. Seems so simple, right? It's 2 sentences that can change the whole thing. But we know that it's not, because if it were, we would have done that already. So we have cultures that have a license to kind of kill, steal, and destroy, metaphorically. We show up to work and we have excused construction as being that industry that can kind of chew people up, because after all, it's construction. I remember my first experience in construction as an apprentice. I cut my hand using a tool that I wasn't trained on. And we have a joke about people putting duct tape on you versus going to the doctor or putting a Band-Aid on it. And guess what? Yeah, I had the duct tape on my hand, and kept pressing, right? Should have got stitches. I still got a scar today that would have been looked nicer on my hand, but that's what it was. That's what you dealt with. And it was okay. It was a license to do that. Less than 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit more, you can go to a game box and open it up, and there's pornography essentially planted all over the game boxes. And it was okay. No one said anything about it. It wasn't okay, but no one said anything about it. And so this industry has a lot of work to do. And I think we're making strides in the right direction. Excuse me, but we need to understand that we're not there yet. And we need to have a mirror, people like myself and you and those who care, to continually shine that mirror to say, we're not there yet. We need to continue to remind ourselves that we have work to do. What is our contribution? How do we show up every day to impact this daunting statistic? And the interesting thing about this statistic, as we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, we obviously think about people of color and we think about women. But this statistic is a high rate, excuse me, with white men. So white men are killing themselves more than any other classification than anyone else in this industry. And so you think this is a group that is privileged. Excuse me. This is a group that doesn't have any issues, right? No, we know that's not true. But this is a group that is coming to work to say, I'm going to end my life. And that's something that we need to pause and reflect on and think about, why is that happening? What is going on in the industry where people just stop caring and they wanted to kill themselves in the workplace, and specifically the construction industry? I have a definition that I stole from Rex Miller years ago that talks about culture. Because we all have our definitions about culture, and my culture is wonderful. We do this, we do that. We have a billboard, we have a website that says this great stuff about our culture. But at the end of the day, the culture is what you do when the boss leaves the room. That's your culture. That's what's really happening. It's like, hey, yeah, I read that that value, that core value that we have, and yes, that's what we do. And in your heart, you're saying, no, it's not. That's not what we do. I don't even believe it. I don't even know what it means. And so you have this kind of duplicit kind of thing going on where people are projecting what they're supposed to do, but really in their heart, that's not where they are. And many times it takes empathy for us to connect with that. But it's also understanding what is our culture. And so as we affect the culture, we definitely will affect the people. So still talking about the current state, I'm going to talk about cultural care a little bit later, but here's a statistic that we use at AGC. And these bullet points here, and we talked about the first one. Thinking about this, women are 40% of the U.S. workforce, but only make up 10%. The number's growing. I know it's like 10.2 or 3, but also only make up 3% of the craft workforce, and so there's a gap, right? And there's a need, and there's a gap. People that look like me make up 12% of the U.S. workforce, but only 6% of the construction workforce. Again, there's a gap, and 46% or more that represent as LGBTQ plus are closeted. So they show up in secret. Maybe sometimes it's obvious, but many times like, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to bring my whole self. I'm going to be distracted, try to do my job, and then hit my finger with a hammer because I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. I'm thinking about what people are thinking about me or not connecting to the work that I'm supposed to be performing because I can't show up like I should. So looking at this image, we build some awesome structures. We can take lands that are separated and bring them together with bridges, build awesome structures that have so much risk sent up to them, and we can do them with safety, with excellence, with collaborative thought, and bring these essentially two lands together. We can do that. We can look at pictures and images and videos of structures, and thankfully we've gotten safer over the years to how we build, but we haven't connected necessarily with the social part of that. And so I have this image here is that we can do this all day, every day with the best of them. Put a team together, folks who love construction, folks who love to innovate and figure out how we're going to do this. And they put their minds together and they show up and they build this structure that is just awesome, right? We can do that. And we've done it. It's proven. We still fall short in an area where we don't really collaborate. We don't really talk to people. We really just want you to shut up and do your job many times. Again, we can default back to, after all, it's only construction. So I have a license to behave this way. And so I have a mission about that. But it's not just about teamwork. It's not just about someone taking their ball and going home and ruining the whole team. It's also about just how we interact with each other, or how the lack of interaction, the lack of recognizing some of the issues that exist and saying, I'm going to just kind of be blind to it so it'll go away. Again, that plane above the cloud. So that's not okay. That doesn't help fix the problem. And so we have to recognize that when we begin to take that plane and land in the real world, where we see what's going on, we connect the dots, and then we see our part. Today for me is not about making anyone feel guilty that has privilege, that has access, that has a power, authority. It's not about trying to make you feel guilty. If you're feeling guilty, that's you feeling guilty. What I do want is to stir people up and recognize that you have authority, you have power to make a difference, possibly more than I can. What are you doing with it? What are you doing with your access? One of the greatest illustrations, I don't have a picture for that today, but one of the greatest illustrations for me most recently is when George Floyd was murdered, and we had this people that came together and they locked arms in arms and they looked differently. Matter of fact, there's probably more people that weren't of color sometimes in that picture that said, this is not okay. That's what access looks like, and people coming together looks like to me. And we have to understand, again, the power that we have and the authority that we have to help make a difference. What does engagement look like? It's kind of, this slide is really not about in necessarily engagement, but I want to start it with that. As you look at this image, you see the candles, the people who think alike. It's always been this way. This is what we've done. This is how we do it. And then you have the light bulb that's going to change the world. But nah, I don't think so. We're not ready for you, so we're going to get rid of you. We're not ready to hear that voice. We're not ready to hear that person talk. Because look at us. We're in numbers. This is what we do. We're fine the way we are. We're okay just the way we're doing things. And we have this innovation that's in our face, and we're saying, no, we're fine. We're good. Go away, right? And so what I want to add to that is, how do we get the people there first, right? How do we get the people that we need to show up when we're thinking like this? What is your role in that, as we talked about? And what can you start doing today to help people get there? So part of my job today here, as I mentioned, I want you to obtain some resources. I want you to read some data. I want you to learn. And again, not just with what I'm saying, but what you do in your own space and time, where you take this very seriously and you understand what your role is here. Again, so what are some resources that we have? About 4 years ago, with Agency of America, we put together a white paper that talks about the business case for diversity. So we're not trying to, like, just like we talk about with lean construction, this is not about kumbaya only, right? We want people to have to treat each other right, but we also understand that it's pressure, there's deadlines. Sometimes you got to get in people's face, and that's the way it is. That's part of construction in any business. We don't have to berate people. We don't have to make people feel small because things are going the way they're not going the way we want them. But there's a way to engage. But more importantly, right now, it's really understanding that there is a business case for diversity and inclusion. There is a business case and there's some statistics I want to go over with you, just so that you can, if you don't know, you'll know today. And you can go and read this. You can go find this paper on AGC's website. So here's our executive summary. So I want to read these 2 points here. So you're talking about driving success. A McKinsey study found that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity are 21% more likely to have financial returns above national industry means, and companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 33% more likely to have financial returns above national industry medians. This is a significant return on investment. So when we talk about a business case, right, there's some math, there's some bottom line impact on having diverse teams. I think we most probably know that. I don't know if it reflects in your businesses, but I think most of us probably can say, yeah, that's true. On this other side here, it says employee retention important. 65% of employees who experience exclusive behaviors said that they would leave or seriously consider leaving if they found a different job in an industry with employee turnover rate of almost 25% and a skilled labor shortage. Work retention is key. Companies can gain a competitive edge in hiring and mitigate the impact of employee turnover through an authentic culture of inclusion. So there's some science behind this. There's some data that supports that diversity is important, inclusion is important, equity is important. How we do that and what that looks like is kind of what we're talking about. But recognize we can't deny that diverse teams that think differently are going to perform better. I mean, go back to the candle and the light, right? Like there's diversity of thought with diversity of people. It's understanding that there are blind spots that we all have. I have blind spots, but as I put a team together, I put people in place that help shape the overall vision, not just how I think. And I'm not offended when you don't think like me. I'm not offended when your thoughts are different. I'm not offended when you don't agree with what I do, but how do we bring the 2 or 3 or 12 ideas together to make one really good idea? How do we do that? We have to stop carrying that, oh, I'm first, because I have the title of CEO, or I'm the executive vice president, or I'm the top manager on this. I got to be the smartest in the room. I have to have the loudest voice. It's actually it's the flip side of that. It's recognizing that as a top tier leader, you help influence the others to shine. That's our responsibility. Here's another couple I want to read to you from the executive summary. And the safety culture. It's estimated that the total cost of fatal and non-fatal injuries to the industry is $13 billion annually. Documentation supports that workers who have not been integrated into a workplace culture or who perceive themselves as outsiders are more likely to have accidents because of the increased psychological and emotional stress of being excluded. Pause and think about that. We know that safety is a top priority, but again, we talk about psychological safety, we talk about showing up. I remember when I was in the field working, I got injured about 2 or 3 times. And I remember when I finally said, I'm done. I had stitches and these kind of things happening to me. And it was almost like I knew why it was happening. It was a carelessness that I had when I was younger and thinking I could do something and take a shortcut. But it's kind of how I thought about it. And I had the power to change that by recognizing what I could do differently. We want to help people recognize that before they maim themselves and hurt themselves in our industry. And when we don't have these cultures that support people, we promote that. We're promoting the things we're trying to prevent when it comes to safety. So we can't just look at safety as saying, I'm going to have these 10 lists of rules of how you use a tool. We also need to have things in place that talk about how I care about your life, how it's important to me, and not just in word, but it shows up at the job where you walk in saying, there's a poster that says they care about my life, but more importantly, there's actions from the people that lead me that say they care about my life. Does that mean I got to go home with you and have lunch and with your family every day? No. But it does mean that, and think about how much time we spend at work versus how much time we spend with the people we sleep next to in our homes. We spend more time with the people at work. So there's our family, to a degree, big time. Innovation derives specific strengths for diverse team inputs. Homogeneous teams may unknowingly develop products, technology, or services that are designed to benefit one type of user, limiting their customer base. In contrast, when employees think their company is committed to diversity and they feel included, there's an 80% increase in their ability to innovate. So innovation leads to better results, and bottom line is impacted by that. Well, just a couple of snippets of things for you to think about. So here's the other thing that I want to make sure that I'm not going to go through all of this because you'll be able to get the slides. But when you're going back to suicide, here's some preventative things to ask, questions to stir up conversation. Is mental health discussed in the workplace? Discussed with the same rigor as physical health or safety? Think about that, right? It may take a little bit more time, and you might need some outside support and help to develop those questions and figure out, how do I do this? And that's okay. Like, how do I do this? But go get the help. Go invest. We know that in our company specifically, if we don't invest certain millions of dollars a year in safety, we'll spend more in getting people fixed and hurt and repairing them and taking them to the doctor. So we know it's worth the investment. We know we have to do those things. So it's the same with psychological safety, is how we impact those people by the preventative actions that we decide to take and policies that we want to put in place to make sure people feel like they're cared about. May sound fluffy, may sound soft. I don't care. That's just what it is. We have to act like we care and not act like we care. We have to care about people in a meaningful way where they know, yeah, this company actually does care that I'm okay. Is that a novel idea? I don't know. All right, so let's get into some statistics about real life stuff that happens in certain communities. This is based on a project, and I purposely took out the actual zip codes, but I think it's important that you understand, what can you do as an owner, or what can you do as a general contractor? What can you do as a leader? What's first important for you to understand? What's important for you to understand is that, let's look at these statistics. This represents a community of people where a job is going to be built. And the owner took upon themselves to understand that what they're up against. I'm going to build this magnificent structure in this community, and I'm not going to give a damn about the people. No, it's understanding, what are the statistics, right? What are the population? What is the percentage of minorities, the age range, the income, poverty? So I decided to take one of these with the highest poverty rate and kind of take those percentages and make them numbers for you. And thinking about this one, that's 1, 2, 3, fourth down, where there's a population of 30,000 people, but the poverty rate is 40%. And median income is barely $30,000. And think about that, 85% minority in this community. The unemployed rate, the unemployment rate that's 5,000 people is what that number represents. 5,000 people do not have work. 6,000 people are uninsured. 10,000 people don't have that graduate from high school, and 16,000 people live in high cost living, and there's 4,000 that are disabled. So when you think about a community that looks like that, what do you expect to happen there? Would you, I wonder why crime's so high? It's high because nobody has a job. Does it mean because they don't want to work? I know people can say, oh yeah, they don't want to work. They don't want to go and do better for themselves. And it's not true. It's absolutely not. It's a falsehood. And it's something that you should not believe. But what you can do to make a difference in a project is you can understand this data, and then you can have an owner that says, guess what? We're going to do something with this. We're going to do something to impact these numbers, and we're going to solicit your support. We're going to solicit your help, and you're going to have to tell us how you're going to do this. And that's something meaningful. That's something significant that we can all partake in. However, what we can't do to impact these numbers is check a box. It's impossible to check a box and be effective. What you can do is say, hey, what am I doing now to build my teams that can go into communities that can really make a difference because they care, first of all, because we care as a company, and we foster that idea with our people, and we give them tools and ways that they can engage to improve versus coming to a group and pointing fingers about why statistics like this exist. Again, if you are in the plane in the cloud, when you land, and some of the communities look like this, some that you may never, ever participate in walking down the street in. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I tell people all the time that the decisions that we make at different levels that impact folks that live in these communities will have a direct impact on our lives, whether we want to accept that or not. When you think about the things that can happen when someone who doesn't have a job, that one is struggling and losing hope, where are they going? Right? We have to understand that what we do to prevent, to help, to support will come right back on us, either in a way that our lack of support, does it mean it's a cure-all? No. But you must know that what you decide to do to get engaged with this will have an impact on you or somebody that you know. And that's important for us to understand. Here's another statistic and some just a life that beyond the data. It's a story. It's a life. This project talked about two different zip codes that were maybe 20 miles apart that had a life expectancy of 10 years difference, mortality rate. 10 years. Imagine that. Just because of where you live, you're expected to live longer or shorter. So what we must do, we got to become partners in this effort. We can't do it by ourselves. Again, we spend more time when we do in our jobs than we do with the people that we call our families. We have to be engaged. And what does it mean to be a real partner? It means going beyond your words and becoming actionable, becoming passionate about something, understanding that you have a real part to play and you can do something to help change lives. So hire partners that will do the job and generally support the mission. Don't hire box checkers. I know the bottom line is important. I know the numbers are important. We have to get that right. But we also have to get people there that really care. And how do you show up? How do you identify that person that cares? They can tell you stories. They can tell you about what they've done. They can talk about the things that they're doing now and how they're going to bring that to a project to help change lives, to draw people in, to encourage people, to mentor people. Box checking will get exposed when you roll out a program that does not allow you to just check a box and say, yeah, I can meet these numbers. Don't know how I'm going to do it. I can't explain to you what steps I'm going to take. I'll go hire some folks to help me get there, but we're not engaged. So you're going to spend more time trying to get people up to speed than the people who just like, I'm ready to go. Pass the baton. Let's go and do this. Build your story with real people. It takes time. Over 12 years that we've been doing this at Southland, and it took a lot of time to get our folks exposed and into the whole part of what it means to be engaging in this space, going down to the construction pre-apprenticeship programs and doing workshops and meeting the people and then ultimately hiring these people. So it's having skin in the game. It's getting involved. It's not a bystander saying, oh, that's great and wonderful. I believe in you. I'm going to send you some money. It's great. They need the money too, but they need you physically engaged or licensing your people to get engaged and say this matters. We all have to be a part of this. We have to come out the cloud and we have to roll our sleeves up and get engaged and be a part of how this thing needs to work. Home in on the mistakes. You're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna fall on our face. We're gonna do it wrong, but we don't stop. Think about what we do in construction. All day, every day, we make mistakes. We learn, we grow, we get better, we fix it. We talk about lessons learned, postmortems, lessons learned, whatever you want to call it. We learn from that. If we're smart, we take it as an opportunity not to criticize and point fingers, but say, okay, now when we do it again and again, then that's a problem. But if we do it one time, maybe a couple of times, and we figure it out, we improve it, we get better, that's what we do. That's what we're comfortable with in the construction world. So we take that same mentality and apply it to this. Apply it to how we can change lives. Apply it to how we can shape and remessage the detriment that exists in our industry and say enough is enough. Like, what are we going to do? We got to address poor behavior. I work in a world where you can say, Charlie is good. That's just the way he is. He's a good guy, right? I don't even use the term good guy anymore, because that term good guy meant that you really weren't a good guy. You just made us money. So I'm going to keep you because you're a good guy. But everything else you do, I got to freaking sweep it under the rug. I got to go debate with HR. I got to go and freaking put out fires all over the place. You're freaking hurting my job because I can't do it because I've got to manage you. We can't license that anymore. We got to let people know that this is not acceptable behavior, and you either choose to get on the bus with us and learn, or time out, take your good guy somewhere else and do it there. We have to show up that way if we actually care, because the people that are watching us, the people that are saying they license the good guy to stay, they license the good guy to act like a hellion, and he's excused or she's excused to do whatever they want because they're the epitome of an employee when it comes to making money, but they have a freaking trail of calamity behind them. And we say that's okay. We excuse it, whether we say I excuse it or with our words. We excuse it by doing nothing. We excuse it by saying, keep going. What about those A's? We change the subject. We don't address the issue. Is it easy? No, I've had to do it. I've had to address people like that and say, you are going to put me in a position where my hands are going to be handcuffed. When we're sitting in front of HR, you will get fired. And I'll sit there and watch you, because you would have ultimately made it impossible for me to do anything for you because you chose to stay down that course. So think about that. Last couple of slides. What steps can be taken? Here's some things that we can do. Again, this is something from a project site. We want to hire, we want to buy, we want to invest, we want to volunteer. And what does that look like? Come up with a definition for yourself, for your company. Take this pledge that for culture of care: commit, attract, retain, and empower your people. You can get more information about this on the website. DEI assessment tool, last thing I'll talk about, affects the workplace, affects the workforce, the vendors, and the community. You can take an assessment that gives you a snapshot of how you're doing. You think you're doing great? Well, maybe you're not. Again, not to shame you, but to help you understand where you're at. And then there's, what do the next steps look like? What do I do to get better? If my score is 30% or 50%, what is the next step? How do I get better? Important for us to do that. Lastly, there's some webinars, there's some sites here that I'm going to share, and you'll be able to go to those. One I want to really highlight here is the Inclusive Leadership Program. It's called White Men as Full Diversity Partners. Don't be offended. Understand that we all have a culture. What culture? What part can you play as a white male in understanding that it's a whole thing, that you can talk to people that look like you. You can share your experiences. You can talk about what you understand, what you don't understand, and really create an environment to see how you become a more impactful partner. No guilt, no shame, just really trying to get in touch with every aspect of who represents our business. This is what diversity looks like. This is being a part of it. We want to get there, and I hope that this helps you to help us get there. Thank you, and I'll open it up for questions.
Great. I'd like to invite the audience to come back and fill in the chat box with any questions you might have. I have many, but I do want to make sure that we have time this morning to talk about this fabulous book. Can you talk a little bit about where people can get it and how it could be used in the workplace?
Absolutely. Yes, you can go to Amazon. It's available either through a paperback, or you can get it on an ebook as well. And it really talks about, there's some basic principles that they're probably, I say they're common sense, but as you know, that common sense is not common all the time. And so it really helps you to understand what some of the struggles and some of the obstacles, many times self-inflicted, that prevent people from really showing up the way they need to show up. And it's not all my story. There's some things that I totally identify with, but I have dad that gave me some great tools and examples of work ethic. And there are a lot of people that don't, and they get in their own way. And because we need to reach this different group of people that really are part of the answer to a big problem when it comes to labor shortage, it will help them, but it also helps the leaders that lead them to understand. Again, we talk about that empathy. It's one of the principles is stop being a victim. We all have a story that can excuse us from doing the right thing. I have a story, but you know what? You can't continue to go down your path and say, well, I can't do it because it's never been done in my family. This is about how do you change that? How do you be the first in your family to say, no, so what? No one graduated from high school or college. Maybe you're the first person. Maybe you start getting on that road versus focusing on what you never had. So it really helps to kind of give some guidance there for both the student as well as the person that would be leading them.
So when Henry and I were getting ready for this webinar, we were chatting a little bit about our own personal experiences. And I said, oh, Henry, I actually have a story about working on a construction site. He said, really? You? And I said, oh, yeah. My dad had a small family-run electrical contracting business. And when I was a teenager, he would drop me off at job sites because there were multiple job sites that he was working on. And he would leave me there to pull wire, put in plugs, switches, very basic work. Excuse me. But I would go to the sites and I would be the only woman on the site. And so because I was there and my dad was doing the work, no one could really say anything to me. So there was a sort of ethos among all the people who were on the job site, who are all men, mostly white men, to just ignore me. So no one spoke with me at all on the job site all day long. Never once did they ever speak to me. And I remember that hazing and just thinking, oh, okay, that's the way it is. And I think that your presentation today and this whole movement, which is happening in this moment, is now finally people saying, no, this is not okay. This is not the way it ought to be going forward in a way that I think is, a lot of people just said, okay, well, that's how it is. And people are now saying, no, it can't be that way. And I just wonder if you want to talk, share perhaps a personal experience that you've had about saying, no, it's not acceptable anymore.
Margie, that's such a great question. And I'll say, fortunately and unfortunately, it wasn't my personal experience, but I was involved with it. So I got to see it kind of evolve. I had a person just the other day that felt she experienced a dismissiveness behavior from a guy in the industry. And she's a proud woman. She's talented, she's smart, she's been around a long time. And she prides herself on not being that woman that is crying wolf for saying this person did this or that. She hates doing that. And she said, I think like my gut's telling me that this person is purposely trying not to see me, acknowledge my comment or conversation, and jokes over the things and glosses over me. And it felt very dismissive. She couldn't think of the word, actually. I said, I think that's dismissiveness is what you're saying. She said, that's it. And she felt it in her gut. And this is like just the other day. And so we had a conversation and I said, guess what? I said, so I affirmed like, yeah, I was there. I could say, yeah, I see that totally. I said, but guess what? This is not your problem. That's his problem. And so you cannot change who you are. But what you do need to do is understand who he is so you don't allow that person to penetrate you anymore. And I gave her an example of how I used to, and we all have cut people off on accident driving down the road. And if we look over to say sorry, they're not saying sorry. They're giving us the finger. They want to ruin our day because they just felt that we ruined theirs. And like, hey, I didn't mean it. So now what do I do when I accidentally cut in front of somebody and they're blowing at me and they're trying to look at me so they can flip me off? I don't allow them to do it because I don't look at them. I just stay focused and say, you don't get to ruin my day. You don't get to correct me for something. And if I wanted to apologize, you wouldn't let me anyway. So it's kind of like putting the force field up and understanding where people are so that you can address them accordingly. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to be spiteful. You don't have to be hateful. You don't have to have a vendetta. You just recognize that this is not my problem. I'm not going to own your BS because you haven't arrived yet. I'm going to stay focused and do what I need to do and you won't get to dismiss me a second time because I won't allow you to. I know when I show up on this playing field, I know who the players are, and I'll know how to conduct myself accordingly so I don't put myself in that situation. And that's again, it happens. And I got many more stories I could tell you about, but that is just one that was this most recent. And unfortunately, those things are still happening every day.
I want to shift gears and ask a different kind of question. I see that we have a couple of building owners who are on this call, and I know that you do some pre-construction work for a really big company. And it strikes me that often owners are the drivers of making change by demanding that the people who do work for them actually come forth and actually do make changes in who they hire, how they hire, et cetera. And I wonder if you could talk about some of the successful ways that Southland has met that challenge, or ideas that you have for how a company like a Southland, or like many of the other companies represented on this call, can actually respond.
Yeah. Again, great question. And I always tell people that I attribute it to like sports. And you see a player that is phenomenal when the season starts. They're just doing great things. They're ready mentally, physically, and it's all about what they've done during the off season. It's all about getting ready and staying ready. And so with Southland, along with some other great companies that are out there doing great work and can bring the people to these jobs to show up in a very meaningful way and not have to go through a one-on-one experience, is because they're doing this kind of work and preparing their teams during the off season when the job is not there yet. It's what they do. It's part of their DNA. It's part of the culture that you have as a company. It's a part of going beyond just the issues that we face and spending a bunch of time just doing busy work. It's really preparing. And so when you show up for these kind of jobs, you can give guidance, you can influence, you can talk about, hey, what's worked for us because here's what we've done, here's the pitfalls that we may have to navigate through. And it's all about what you're doing that is a part of really the makeup of your company. And it's not, oh, let's get ready for this thing to happen. Let's get ready for practice or for the game tomorrow. No, let's get ready for practice last year. And let's keep doing this. Let's keep going because game time shows up and we don't have time to get ready then. We have to be in preparation all the time.
I see that Dean Reed, who's a CIDCI board member, has a question.
Henry, can you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion as sort of a foundation for problem solving and improvement, for actually working smarter and delivering a better building for our customers?
Absolutely, Dean. You think about the different aspects of diversity. I think we get that one. We need more people that don't look the same. We need to have environments that allow people to feel like they belong there. And equity, we need to make sure that the opportunities that exist recognize the disparities that may exist that each group may have. And so I look at this as, again, you look at respect for people as a tenet of LCI and how that encompasses all these other things that are important to build a great structure. Diversity, equity, inclusion will ultimately recognize the blind spots that exist within a team. And when we are open to allowing everyone to have a voice and to bring their whole selves into this space and show up in a way and say, hey, it's okay for you to raise your hand and say something. We want to hear your voice. Whether we agree with it or not is not the thing, but the actual culture promotes everyone to be engaged with their experiences and the scenarios that they've had from past projects, from failures, from successes, and the whole envelope is essentially it's everyone being able to be a part of it. And so the DE&I in this industry is the innovation. It's an innovative step of really ensuring that those voices will be heard, that we recognize the things that people need, and we're purposeful in putting together policies and information or initiatives that will drive that kind of behavior. And then it's about also saying what we're not going to allow anymore. And this is not going to, it's not a fad. It's going to show up and then go away. It really is the crux of who we are as human beings. It's about, you know what? I just want you to be a better human being at the end of the day. I want you to be a better human being. And that's what I tell people. It doesn't, I don't assign a race and ethnicity necessarily all the time. It's just, I just want you to be a better human being. And I want you to treat other people with professionalism. Where you go home to and what you do, I can't control that. But I can say how you show up here. And I need you to bring your whole self to work as well. I need you to bring all that you have. And then I need you to allow others to do the same. Because if you don't, you're missing something. And that's the innovative component, I believe, of DEI, is that it's an innovative step towards maximizing the assets that people bring that we most of the time miss out on because we don't allow for that kind of interaction to happen because we're afraid or we're just ignorant to it.
Henry, that was such a moving ending. I think I'm just going to stop right there and ask you whether you have any last words that you'd like to share with us.
Thanks, Margie. This has been a wonderful experience for me, and I've never caught myself, seeing myself here is probably, when I say here, I mean just overall being a voice for this. It's not something that I woke up one day and said, I want to do this. I care about people. And I really do, and it's all people, and I want people to have a voice, and I want the person in the back of the room like a piece of wood that blends in and never says anything, but has the most amazing ideas that the world misses out on. I want that person to have courage to stand up, because that was me many years ago, and so we all have something to contribute. We should all look for that person that is not speaking up, that is silently back in the back of the room and not being a part. We're missing something, and we need to engage and show up. We need to come out of the sky above the clouds and come down to the real world and get involved, get your hands dirty, get a part of it. It takes all of us to do this, and just your part. No, not someone else's part. Just do your part, but recognize what that part is, and then show up. Put your game suit on and show up and be a part of the team in life. And just so happens we spend much of that life at our jobs. And we need people to show up and be good human beings.
Henry, thank you so much. This was such a moving conversation, inspiring, and also sometimes hard to listen to. So I thank you for weaving it together in such a poetic and powerful way for all of us. So let's hope for a better future for everyone who's building the buildings which save our lives, teach our children, and house all of us. So thank you again so very much. Be sure to buy his book on Amazon, The 7 Principles, Creating Your Success in the Construction Industry. And we'll have you again back here soon, Henry. It was really great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks, Margie. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Next Thursday, please join CIDCI for a conversation with Vince Martinez and Kira Gould from Architecture 2030. They'll explore how might we achieve meaningful carbon emission impact in the AEC sector. They'll explore opportunities for carbon reduction in the built environment, including building green infrastructure, building reuse, and innovative materials. This concludes CIDCI's online salon. This session will be recorded and placed on the CIDCI website and YouTube as soon as possible. To join us for future webinars, be sure to join and subscribe to our newsletter at cidci.org. Special thanks to Katie Olson for keeping us on track and our sponsors who make all of this possible. Thanks for joining us. If you've got thoughts or comments, please reach us at CIDCI website's contact us link. See you next week. Thank you.